You want to talk about the Knights Templar?
Yeah, this is something, you know. Let me just say something about conspiracies in general. Which now we have the two Kennedy assassinations. We have the Martin Luther King assassination. We have the Lincoln assassination. We have the Masons, the Freemasons, you know, who are pulling all the strings, and the Council of 15 or the Council of 12, these little dwarf bankers pulling it, and then there's all these conspiracies basically that are around the world. My own feeling about it is that in terms of the political assassinations, that you have to look very hard at a potential conspiracy. All of those assassinations, the two Kennedys, no matter what they say, with the Warren Commission and the rest of it, all the proofs that have come out, that this guy pumped out 3 bullets in 2 seconds, whatever it was, and they all hit their mark, you know. I've seen the proofs, but you're talking about a guy, the whole thing doesn't make sense to me. It's even how they found him, he wasn't a suspect. Just some guy who was working there, was eating, he just went out, how they found it. The thing was a setup to some degree. We just kind of smell setup. So the same with Ray, you know, the guy who killed King. They were part of some conspiracy as to whether they were put into motion through some kind of mind control, or whether they were part of some very small group. But in terms of these financial political conspiracies, it's very hard to think of any group who is conspiring to set world events in motion. It's much too unpredictable what's going to happen. Much too unpredictable, I think. They could have a whole general trend, which is, let's forget about Africa. You know, guys have money and position and power, you know, they're basically, I was 20 years in the business world, so I know when guys get to a certain position what they think. So in a way, is that if we're going to give $100 billion to Africa, they go, forget it. It's going to go down the drain. You know? So you can see that consensus amongst them, because that's the way powerful, very greedy men work. So there's a certain consensus of opinion that they'll tend to fund certain things and not other certain areas. They'll try to influence their own banks and then the World Bank. But it's a very complex operation. Nobody can get what they want. It's hard in the world, it's hard in the US, it's almost impossible. You can get your share, but to try to control the way things are done in the US, it's hard. You have to sway public opinion, and that's very hard to do, because it just sticks right in the middle. So that in terms of conspiracies, I think in terms of the assassinations, definitely. In terms of these great financial banking things that are going on, pulling strings, that's just a kind of fantasy that people have who are powerless, who see that they have no control over their lives, they can be fired in a moment's notice, who have grown up here in the US thinking that it's supposed to be a nice government, but the government is always filled with pigs. That's the guys in the government, the senators and the House reps, how they slice the pie for the pigs. That's why all this bribery is going on, and, you know, in terms of whatever they call these guys, lobbyists, just to change the laws, you know. But there's so many of them, and they're so greedy that they can't get that big. The Knights Templar brings me to a whole other thing, because that's supposed to be the kind of seedbed. They were big money makers. They were the first bankers and things like that. That's a kind of sidelight. What it really doesn't take a look at is that whole issue of the 12th century, which was a tremendous spiritual uprising. We have not only in terms of Knights Templar, when it was first formed, was from people of noble birth who gave their money. It's unthinkable for us today. Give our money? Are you kidding? You know, maybe 10% if we're real Baptist crazy guys, but nobody will give their money, their fortunes, but they gave their fortunes because they really believed in salvation. They believed in Jesus, you know. They were knights. They believed in that, you know, courtly love and all that stuff, you know. So what you had is you had a very small group of men who started a movement. And a movement was you gave up your wealth and you became a knight to protect the pilgrims. And like some of the studies say, the first 12 knights couldn't protect anything. You're talking about vast thousands of miles to Jerusalem. But it became a phenomenon. More people did it, and more people did it who were knights, you know, in there. That whole 12th century is when all the cathedrals are going up, the 11th and 12th century. When all of the religious relics suddenly appear. When the Virgin and the Magdalene become enormous presences, spiritual presences. So you're talking about a fomenting religious, real life. When everybody in a town in Chartres, which is a little dinky town in France, got up to build that cathedral, everybody just gave up their money. You know, it's not only the dukes who did it, everybody was in the deal, you know. So it would take them 20 years to build. It was or 50, whatever it was, or 30, it was enormous. It was like the pyramids. And every town did it, independently, you know, as they went. What you had is you had a tremendous spiritual uprising that preceded the actual Renaissance. And in fact, the Templars were basically part of that to start with. As to how they developed, whether they were all homosexuals and you're gunning each other in the back rooms, God knows. You know, but Hitler used that same thing against the SS to get rid of them, you know. He declared them all homosexuals because he was scared of them, you know. So that's a nice trick. You know, you go and he did it at night just like Hitler did, you know, Pope did it. So what you have is you have a spiritual uprising, and they were one of the elements of that. They didn't have much to do with the Freemasons. You know, that they were destroyed, they were wiped out, and they were all killed. You know? And I'm sure that they were obsessed as anybody with the bringing back of relics. That's the Shroud of Turin appears for the first time in around 1200, you know, 1100, you know, whatever that thing is. Everything starts to appear. Where'd it come from? You know?
Well, there was a market for it.
There's a market for it, right, you know, and people wanted it for prestige. But to be a Knights Templar, I gave my wealth away. You're talking about an age where that was your courtly love, where you would betroth yourself to a beautiful woman. You'd never touch her. You know, it's that courtly love, you know. She was on a high pedestal, and that's how you lived your life, you know. Praising her, you know. It was just crazy.
Well, that sounds like it'd be a lot of fun for the woman for about 15 minutes.
No physical contact. Well, that's something that had to break down eventually, but that's a whole praising of the female principle that these super masculine knights who would, you know, they had kind of grown out of the Roman legions, you know. And they had their own little castles, and they were fighting just like Odysseus had his own little castle, and he'd go out and grab your stuff and bring it back to his castle, you know. But there was a civilizing influence, there was a spiritual influence. It started to take birth. Nobody knows why. It just started to grow. So that's what I want to say about the Templars and about those things. I think Templars, you have to look at them as part of that, and they may have become a little corrupt as time goes on. I don't know. It sounds like a very familiar denouement on the part of the Pope to declare them all homosexuals and devil worshippers. It's like Hitler did the same thing, you know. So come on, that's, you know.